Welcome Stephanie to the show. Vocal, Val, take it away.
Well, today is a special day. Usually we do vocals with Val on Friday. We did meet Monday, so we're making this a little bit more of
Weekly.
a weekly thing, Reese. And today we have a special guest, Stephanie Garcia Richard, who is our very first female Latina state land commissioner. And I'm happy to bring her on board because when she ran for office, she did spend a lot of time here in Socorro. We got to know both her and her husband quite a bit. We went out to Alamo. She enjoyed the parade. She was brave enough to sample a twister out there. So to our show.
Hey, Val, it is great to be with you all this morning. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about who Stephanie Garcia Richard is, first of all.
Yeah, so I am actually, I'm a native New Mexican. I was born down in Silver City. Sorry, I was born in Chukunqueray. I was raised down in Silver City. And so, I'm puro sureña, like you all there in Socorro. Sometimes it feels a little bit like we get forgotten by the northern part of the state, and so we all kind of have to band together and make our voices heard down in southern New Mexico. And then I became a teacher like my dad. And after I was a teacher, I started to see that the state legislature was not hearing the voices of teachers in their policy, so I decided to run for state legislature. And I served there for 6 years, including I was the chairman of the House Education Committee. Then I had this idea to run for land commissioner, and we could talk a little bit about this, Val, but essentially the land office is the body responsible for drawing revenue, making money for New Mexico's public schools. So, Socorro Public Schools, all of the schools in your area, they rely on the revenue that we bring in from the land office. And so as a school teacher, I thought that was a perfect fit for me. And actually, I am the first educator, as well as the first Latina, first woman. I'm the first educator in this position as well, Val.
Well, that's awesome. And I think a lot of people don't understand that or don't realize that land office helps to fund the schools, the colleges, other parts of government in New Mexico. And with COVID and everything, I could imagine it's been hard keeping up with revenue, or have you done better, or which way is that going?
Yeah, so amazingly, even though we were told, we were told by folks, oh, don't hold people who use state land accountable. Don't hold the companies accountable because they're going to close up shop. They're going to move to Texas. We actually have experienced the opposite. Even though we put in some pretty strong environmental protections, even though we have made fresh water off limits to fracking, we have still, even with those restrictions in place, experienced record-breaking revenues at the land office. And this is to the tune of being the first commissioner in the history of the land office to raise $1 billion, and my line is billion, in 2019, and then we did it again in 2020, 2021, and we're on track to do it again this year because the first 3 months of the year we have seen even higher revenue than we ever had before, like 200 million per month is what we're seeing in January, February, and now our early returns for March. So we are just, rocking and rolling here at the land office, but not at the expense of the resource. I want to make that clear to your listeners, Val, that we work with our companies to ensure that they are properly plugging the oil wells. They are properly remediating that land back to its original state when they're finished using it. And that has saved taxpaying New Mexicans millions of dollars in cleanup costs. So where that environmental cleanup is borne by the oil and gas industry, that means New Mexicans don't have to pay those costs in taxes, okay?
And I think you mentioned it before, but I think it's worth saying again, is that you're also not allowing them to use the fresh water supplies of New Mexico,
That's
which
right.
is precious for drinking and for farming. And I think all of that goes back to the promises you made when you were running, that you're not going to sacrifice the beauty of the land of New Mexico and the people of New Mexico, the generations that have used our soil and our mountains for hunting, for farming, for ranching. And I think that's been the case up to now, correct?
Yeah, and actually, so my background, I come from a ranching family on the east side of the state. So, like I started out by saying, I was born in Chucancarry. My grandfather ran a ranch out there in a little community called La Garrita. And those agricultural values that are generational, those have been instilled in me. And that's the kind of land commissioner I wanted to be. So, you're absolutely right, Val. When I was running for office, I talked about the health of the land, really preserving that health of the land for future generations. That's part of my job at the land office. I can't just sell off the land or develop the land at the highest dollar and destroy it for future generations. I have to keep both of those things kind of in balance. And so I took those ethics, those values that I was taught by my family who works land, and I took those to the land office to ensure that we are protecting, like you said, the health of the soil, the health of the wildlife that's there, and most importantly, the water, because the water is scarce, as we all know.
Oh, yeah.
You all, especially on the San Agustin Plains out there, um, we can't be just using millions of gallons of that water to frack. We can't be using millions of gallons of that water for industry. That's for drinking. That's for animals. That's for agriculture. We have to preserve that fresh water because it's scarce.
And I think one of the best things about you is because you are a teacher, you believe in education, you believe in science. So we do understand that there's better ways to do fracking and that kind of recovery of natural gas that recycles old water instead of using fresh water, but also because of understanding science is that we do realize that our big dollar maker, which is oil and gas, is going to eventually and very soon need to be replaced by renewable energies, even though it is such a big part of those billions of dollars we talked about. How are you handling and balancing that juggling act?
Yeah, so let me just be real clear. Right now, the billion beginning of the program are generated by oil and gas activity on state lands, primarily down in the southeast part of the state in Eddy and Lee counties. We have looked at ways as that resource starts to dwindle down, and no matter you're thinking about oil and gas development, even if you don't believe in climate change, even if you want that oil and gas development to continue into the future, you have to understand it is a finite, non-renewable resource. The oil and gas will not be as productive as it is today at some point in the future. So we need to start looking to replace that revenue. But we can't replace it dollar for dollar. There is nothing that will make us as much money as the oil and gas does. So what we need to do is look at multiple ways, all strung together, to try and make up that revenue. We can't make it up dollar for dollar any other way. So one of the ways that we have really started to focus on in the land office is building up renewable forms of energy, renewable, sustainable forms for New Mexicans to power their homes and their businesses, but also for us to make money by selling that renewable energy to those vast markets in Arizona and California. Because what we learned from energy developers is that when the sun is setting in California and parts west, the wind is just picking up here in New Mexico. So we have a perfect market advantage. And so we've been starting to build. We have now the largest wind farm in the history of the state over on the eastern side of the state, there in Lincoln and Torrance counties. You may have seen it if you've gone south on the 285 there. That large wind farm is patterned. It's called Western Spirit. That is partly on state land. And we are on track now, Val, to triple the amount of renewable energy on state land here in the next few months. We have been just really working hard. We opened the first ever office of renewable energy at the land is to bring renewable energy to state land so that we can start to replace and transition some of the revenue away from oil and gas, looking towards the future to make up that money in more sustainable, renewable ways.
And I think one of the benefits we also see in that is that we give some of these ranchers that are having such a difficult time with the beef industry another possible source of revenue by terms on their properties as well as being able to raise cattle at the same time. Am I correct?
So I'll tell you a great example of that, Val. I'm glad you brought that point up. We were up in Union County. So Union is one of the farthest northeast counties up there. Clayton, if you all know Clayton, that's in Union County. A lot of private land ownership, a lot of large acre ranches, and we actually held a panel where the county of Union sponsored it, and we had renewable energy, we had wind folks out there, we had transmission companies up there, and we invited those private landowners in. Some great turnout at that panel. Some private landowners that are real excited to build renewable energy on their ranches.
And I think one of the conversations that was happening back when I was the assessor 16, 20 years ago is that those transmission lines weren't healthy for the cows. I think some myths that have been debunked in some way, or I don't know if continuing data has been taken about that. You know, because that has always been one of the conversations I hear from ranchers here locally in Socorro County.
And I think in addition to debunking some of those beliefs about transmission lines and wind farms, in fact, there's some misinformation about wind farms and you know, their impact on ag. I think in addition, these transmission companies, because they are serious about their build out here in New Mexico, they have actually been meeting with local communities on the siting the routes so that the route for the transmission line itself has
Transmission lines that was very controversial was the Sanzia project, and I think
That's right.
because that went through the Bosque del Apache, it affected some other areas of Socorro County, and I did see a lot of conversation on both parts. So hopefully, those kind of things can be taken care of, and we satisfy both parties so that we come to an agreement. Now, in addition to oil and gas and the battle with renewables, what other sources of revenue do we have coming to your office?
So I am pleased to last session, they have increased the amount of time that we can do a no bid lease with some of our municipal and county partners. So we have leases with McKinley County, Cibola County, the city of Albuquerque on economic development. So for example, the brand new Netflix studio in Albuquerque, that's on state land. Up in the northwest part of our state, with the shutting down of the Escalante coal-fired power plant, those folks are now looking to transition to using state land for a manufacturing and industrial park. So those are some other ways that we're making money for the land office and ultimately for public schools and universities like New Mexico Tech.
Oh, wonderful. So, in addition to that, we also rely on permits like hunting and fishing and hiking and stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about that. But first, you mentioned something about New Mexico Tech and land that belongs there. Are any of the other colleges involved in those kind of situations? Because I can see where, laboratories out in the field can benefit by the colleges going out onto public lands. But in return, are you getting anything as far as revenues from those colleges that use state lands for that kind of data recovery or laboratory work?
Yeah, we absolutely are, but it's minimal. We like to provide access to public land for research purposes. I know there's a lot of research being done now on things like, for example, with Highlands, where they have a field lab on state land. And we've got an agreement with them where they lease the land from us and they have their biology, wildlife, ecology students out on the land taking data, like you mentioned. So it can work both ways. We make money for the schools, but they also have partnerships with us where they use the land themselves. New Mexico State University, a lot of the land that surrounds their campus is actually state land that we manage on their behalf. So we're working with them on things like expanding their golf course and things like that.
So then I guess permitting helps you to track the activity on state lands is probably one of the most important parts of all these permits for hiking and fishing and these agreements with the colleges so that we actually know exactly what's happening on the state lands to make sure that we're not affecting any of the environment or the species that are living on them. Correct?
Yeah, so let me just be real clear. So you're referring to our recreational access permits. So in order to go out and recreate on state land, you need a recreational access permit from our office. Now, we made it easier in these COVID times to do that. You just go to our website, and it's nmstatelands.org. Again, nmstatelands.org. And you click on outdoor rec, and you fill that permit out online, and you can pay the nominal $35 for a year's permit. You can access all of state lands statewide for $35 a year. And I was telling you before the program started, Val, we designed this recreational permit because we know that New Mexicans like to recreate in groups with their familia. They take their grandmas and grandpas and tios and tias and their primos. So you can recreate on this permit with you and then 10 of your family members. And that's for 1 year, $35, you and 10 of your family members statewide. And the reason that we do these permits, number one, we can't give anything at the land office away for free. We have to charge folks for the use of your public lands. I can't just give that away for free. I can't give it away to oil and gas companies, and I can't give it away to people who want to hunt and camp on state lands. But we try to keep that cost down because we want state lands to be open, available, accessible for recreation. We know that's a large part of who we are as New Mexicans. We've been out on the land, working the land for generations. And we want to continue that practice. We want to encourage people to come out on state land, especially in these times of COVID. It is very healthy to be out on land. It's kind of restorative. I want New Mexicans to be able to appreciate and enjoy their state land. So we have kept those costs down. But then again, of use of state land in the Socorro Box area, we'd like to help them. They'd like to plan a loop trail, hiking trail at the Socorro Box location, and we're wanting to use state land to help them do that.
And I heard a radio show with Jeff Steinborn from Las Cruces. He helped sponsor a bill, I think 2016, 2015, to develop that hiking trail from northern New Mexico all the way to Las Cruces along the Rio Grande. And I know up to date about 80 miles of it has been completed in scattered pieces. And I think Socorro's part of that. What I would encourage to make sure that we try to reach out to is those disabled members of our communities, let them know that there is wheelchair access, and to get feedback from the different organizations of people with disabilities as to how to make those things better. I think that would be a good thing to follow up on. I do sit on the Governor's Developmental Disabilities Council, and Alice McCoy over there is our director. So maybe we can get in conversations about how we do things to reach out to those people with disabilities, because they've been one of the most shut-in people throughout this COVID thing, and inviting them and making it more available to get out into New Mexico outdoors and enjoying them a little better would be great. So
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Val. If I could just cut in real quick to
Sure.
let you know, we were approached by a city councilor down in town of Silver City, and she asked us the very same question. She said, "As you are building out these trails, please remember to make them accessible for everyone." And she put us in touch actually with a gentleman who has a company called Global Opportunities. He works on adaptive trail making. And we have already attended one of his webinars to talk about all of the criteria you need to make an adaptive trail. So adaptive to wheelchairs, people with mobility adaptations. And we're actually looking at San Lorenzo Canyon, which is right there, actually, I think in your neck of the woods there,
Yes,
Val,
yes. We're
to
very
make
familiar.
that trail on state land adaptive. So I absolutely would love to work with you additionally on that, but we that has been called to our attention, and we are very committed to making state land accessible for all.
Well, and you got my number, so just send me an invitation. And you talked a little bit about your website. I did go on the website yesterday, and a couple of things that I got to make comments about is that it is very easy to get that family permit. I did that, but I was also so amazed at the
Here.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I turned off my video just in case.
Okay,
that's-
yeah, we're seeming to have a little bit of bandwidth issues. Go ahead, Val.
some little. We did have a question as we're monitoring our broadcast here, our live Facebook feed. Is my brother Seppi actually asked Madam Commissioner how much money in the last few years have we raised for education in New Mexico through the land office?
Hey, Seppi! I hope to see. So it's going to be three billion. Actually, it's a little over 3 billion in the last 3 years.
Fund education. Can you talk just a minute about that?
Yeah, so that fund now is at $36 billion, and we've got investments in that fund all over the world. We have been seeing record interest earned into that fund as well these last couple of years. So that fund is incredibly healthy. And you're right, Val, that fund is on behalf of public schools and the beneficiaries. But the voters will have a chance to decide in November if they would like an additional 1% to be set aside for early childhood education. And Val, this is a great passion of mine, because here in New Mexico, if we can support our families with early childhood education, that's 0 to 3, before a child even reaches the kindergarten classroom door, they are much better equipped for school.
So, well, I went through my list of questions. Reese, do you have anything you want to add or ask the commissioner?
Yeah, Commissioner Garcia, Commissioner Richard, quick couple questions. You mentioned the transmission line companies and the wind farms, and we've talked about the trail systems. Both of these right-of-ways and these properties make good access for broadband. APS, Arizona
Yes.
Public Service in Arizona, is updating one of their transmission lines to the small town of Payson, Arizona, and in the process of it, they're bringing some of the optical fiber off of those transmission lines into a separate facility for providers of broadband activity to connect those rural communities into broadband. I did the same thing with IBM and EagleNet, and a part of these high voltage transmission lines over public right-of-ways is optical fiber. Typically, a minimum count by most utilities is about 48 fibers minimum. But if the community was involved in that, there's a real opportunity to connect broadband, as well as our trail system, where if we put trail systems under the if we put fiber under the trail systems.
I heard the first part of it. You're asking about broadband build out as we're doing these transmission build out and trail build out.
That's correct.
Yeah, so I thought that the legislature had been contemplating a bill, and I don't know what the end result of it was, where they are mandating that as if you are going to be building certain pieces of infrastructure like transmission lines, that you are required as well to provide conduit for fiber. I don't know specifically around Sunzia, but I think that is a perfect opportunity to run fiber. That'd be run up the Rio Grande corridor. Obviously, from just this experience of this call right now, we know that our broadband needs to be beefed up along the Rio Grande corridor. So,
amen.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of the transmission lines, Commissioner, they have what's called optical ground wire. And for their teleprotection circuits, they require to have optical fiber, so there's already optical fiber aerial with those transmission lines. The key is that when they build out those transmission lines to get additional fibers added to add broadband access to the rural communities and to make a broadband network in New Mexico, much like Arizona Public Service is doing in Arizona, with taking some of those optical fibers out and bringing them to a safe, secure location outside of the substation. For broadband providers. So they don't necessarily have to run a separate conduit. As far as the long distance right of ways, it's already there. It's just making sure that optical ground wire contains public and fiber that can be used to connect the communities like we did with EagleNet up there in Colorado.
Okay, all right. That's something I need to better look into, but I think also would be a little bit of a bargaining chip for local communities who are going to have these lines come through to say, we will support the build out of this transmission as long as this public access to fiber is included.
Yeah, that would go a long way to transforming rural communities and connecting every rural community in the state of New Mexico to broadband, because they have to put the fiber in for their teleprotection. It's already there.
How much we need to work on our connectivity through the land office, through the legislature, through the school districts, cities and counties as well. I want to thank my guest, State Land Commissioner Stephanie Garcia Richard, for being with us today. Hopefully we'll hear from her again soon. You got a little bit about what happens in her office. We got a little bit about the promises she kept in the last 3 years that she's been our land commissioner. Everything looks at she's doing a very positive job for all New Mexicans in conserving our state lands, in utilizing them, in giving us access as well. So, Commissioner, thank you so much for being with us on Vocals with Val.
Thank you all.
All right, Stephanie, thank you again, Commissioner. Have a great afternoon. And again, thanks for joining us on behalf of Rio Grande Valley Radio. You've been listening to Vocal with Val.
All right. You still there, Stephanie?
I just ended it.